Hi guys, welcome back. So it's now time to revisit this techno beat and do some more processing on it. And later on in this lesson we're going to do some parallel processing, which is a pretty nifty technique for crunching your drums up if that's what you want to do. And it's just a way of blending it in so it's not sort of overpowering too much. But let's just see what we got so far. I'll bring in some of these other instruments as well, just so you can hear the progression of this track, or how it might go if it was a full track. So maracas in now, clave, and the bass. Some effects. And this effect here was just made with one hit of a drum, bounced down with a lot of reverb on it, and then literally sidechained, so it's got that dipping on it. That's all it is. Shaper box on it. So it just dips. And of course you can use the tail filter too for free if you want the same effect. So let's just go back to basics on this one before we get into parallel processing and ask ourselves, is the kick coming through? That's one of the most important questions. And I've made a couple of adjustments to this. I've boosted it at 52 Hertz. I'm going to play this without the EQ. So this is without the EQ. And this is with. So it's got a lot more oomph now in the sub region. So it's just a very narrow Q, which is the narrow band of frequencies we're affecting. And it's at 52 Hertz, and we're giving 5.5 dBs of gain. So I'll just do before and after again. So it's giving a lot more oomph down the bottom end. And the other thing I did was to shorten the sample off. So I think it was here before. And you'll hear that you'll get a lot more sub-tail. But because we've got quite a fast bass line here, just remind ourselves that we've got only a 1/16th to work with here. So if you remember from a previous lesson, we need to get this kick out of the way of the bass line quite quickly. So that's why I've decided to make this a bit snappier and get it down to a shorter length. You could go even shorter if you wished to do so. I think we need to just shorten this off a little bit though. Let's just bring that back a little bit, the fade out. Okay, so that's probably what I'll go with. The other option is, of course, is to just take out this note here, which is another option to bring the bass in slightly later. Let's just have a listen to that. Anyway, the answer to the question now is yes, the kick is coming through nicely. Although it's distorted and sort of a darker sounding kick in this techno genre, I can still hear it coming through. Which is super, super important. I also increased the volume of the click clean, which is the click basically. Beef that up a little bit volume wise, and that's the beauty of having your click on a separate track. It gives you full control. It's got its own volume fader, and you can obviously apply any effects to that as well, just to the click as well, so that's really, really handy. So as we did before, I would put everything that's not kick related. The top end can go in, but I've already got processing on these, I've already got trash on these, as you remember from the first techno lesson. So I put all the drums in, obviously not the bass. I've got them all color coded so it's easier for you to see. So obviously not the bass, not the effects, but all the drums and percussion can go into a group now, and we can process these, which is what I've already done. I've already created the drum group here. And let's have a look at some processing now. So as before, my sort of go-to group processing chain would start with an EQ. If you remember, we take out anything below probably 150 or thereabouts, just so we don't have any sub in our drums. Obviously the kick is not included here, very, very important. The next thing I would do is just a little bit of glue compression. We've done this before in the last lesson. 2 or 3 to 1 on the ratio. A slowish attack to let the transients through. But this is just going to have the effect of tightening up the drums and making them all sound together. We've done all this before, so I won't spend too much time on it. And adjust the threshold accordingly to getting between 3 and 6 dBs. Reduction, which is here, all depends on what sort of style you're going for. So with a quick release as well, to make the sort of compression snappy, you can just about hear they're just a tiny bit more together. So on to Trash, one of my favourites at the moment, Trash 2. And just remember that this was free quite recently. I'm making this tutorial in February 2022, and I picked this up for free very recently. So follow Isotope on Twitter, and you may be able to search through some of their posts, and maybe it is still free, I don't know. Just gone for Add Muscle preset on a very, very low mix, so hardly any wet mix here at all. Let's just see what happens to these drums when we bypass it. So 4 beats on bypass, and then I'll unbypass it. So it's just saturating the top end and adding a slight bit of nice distortion to the top end. Maybe I'll put the mix up just so you can really, really hear it. Just basically adding a lot of grit and aggression and attitude, which I love. So that's what I would do for this. You may also want to consider a multi-band compressor. Again, you can tweak the individual bands until the cows come home, and it's probably a good idea to do that if you've got more time. I'm going to start with a preset. There's always loads and loads of really good presets in these plugins, and there's no shame in starting from a preset and then tweaking it accordingly. So we'll go with Dance Master. So before. So that's the importance of balancing the outputs, so your before and after is the same. Otherwise, louder you think is better. So you can see here it's compressing the top 2 bands. Again, giving a slightly more aggressive feel. The more compression, the more averaged out the volume is, therefore the more the perceived loudness and therefore perceived aggression. So that's another thing you can consider, compressing your bands individually. Just going to turn that off for a second and put Squasher on. Squasher is a Cubase plugin. It's an upwards and a downwards compressor. Most compressors are downwards compressor, i.e. when they go over the threshold, or when the sound goes over the threshold, it compresses the sound down. But if you have an upwards compressor as well, it means that when the sound falls below a certain threshold, the compressor will bring up. So you have the effect, like here, I'll show you, of squashing it not only from the top downwards, but from the bottom upwards. And this is all changeable here. So the threshold is here, look, this is the lower threshold. So if a sound goes below this threshold here, it will be pushed up in volume, and traditionally here, you can change the normal threshold that you're probably more used to, where the sound gets taken down. So if you put these like this, then the sound is going to be completely squashed into these 2 points here, or in between these 2 points here. So again, start with a preset is what I would do. This is if you really want to squash your drums to bits. There is a mix control, which is great, so you can only have a little bit of this if you want. Let's have a listen anyway. So obviously that is completely lifting up the top end, but let's just do a 50% mix and bring down the output to start with. Before, after. Now there's loads and loads of presets that I would recommend you kind of start with and then do your own settings from there. Let's just have a listen to Drums Smashed. You can hear that it's really absolutely smashing the crap out of that drums, even on a very, very low mix, so that's probably way too much. But it depends. If you've got a really aggressive track, this is a really, really good plugin for that. And of course you can tweak all these things to your desire. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. And by the way, because it's got a mix control, this is kind of like parallel processing, which is what we're going to come on to in just a second. So I'm just going to turn all these off. We'll keep on the glue compressor because that's really subtle. So I'm now going to go over to our parallel processing track, and let me just show you how I set it up before we actually talk about what it is. So I created a new group. So to do that, either right click here or just add a new group. Obviously follow along in your DAW on how you create a group or a bus, sometimes called a bus. So give it a name, parallel, and then add track, something like that. And then what you want to do is just create a send. So again, let's say you're on the drum group and you normally have like reverb up here or something like that. You can also send to another group channel. So you would select groups, parallel, so the parallel channel, and turn it up to full, so that would be 0 dB. So basically you're sending a copy of this signal here in the drum group over to another channel. The idea here is to really, really crush the hell out of the copy signal, the second signal here, crush it with squasher, trash, reverb, whatever you want to crush it with. Even guitar amp plugins are quite good here, and you just mix in a tiny bit of it. So it is similar to the plugins with a mix control on, but not all plugins have a mix control. For example, this multi-band compressor doesn't have a mix control. So let's just have a look. I've got some reverb on here, and you know, you can, when you start compressing the hell out of reverb, it can sound also quite aggressive. We've got squasher on here, again with Drums Smashed plugin, preset. Again, these are really, really aggressive settings, so you can dial them down if you wish. Just back off the threshold and the ratios. And we've got a bit of trash on here as well. Lizard bite halfway. Let's just see what happens. So we've got all these squashy, crunchy distortion type plugins, and we're just going to blend them in. So it's really mid-rangey, the squasher. Just try Slam Dunk too. They've all got slightly different ways of processing the sound. So like I say, some really smash the top, some really smash the narrow mid-range or the high mids or the low mids. So you might only want an absolutely tiny bit of that. You may not want the reverb, let's say. Let's turn that off. So before and after. I think I got some fairly good results going back to the Drums Smashed, or maybe Drums Punchy. So all the best guys, see you in the next one, bye bye.